You found it. Your home for the best content on your favorite team, the Fighting Tigers of LSU. Do us a favor. Subscribe to the channel. Leave your comments below. And be sure to smash that like button. Over the weekend, LSU had media availability at practice on Saturday, and then defense coordinator Matt House spoke with reporters. And I was particularly interested in hearing what Matt House had to say, because coming into this camp, I think a lot of us probably figured this defense, Harold Perkins, getting Maason Smith back, Omar Speights, that this defense would be ahead of the offense, at least initially. And for the first week and a half, it was the exact opposite. We talked about it ad nauseum. Offense really just came booming out of the gates, and the defense has kind of been slowly but surely playing catch-up. And Matt House, when he met with reporters, kind of alluded to that this isn't an overnight thing for this defense, and they kind of knew from jump that this was going to take some time.
We're growing, but by no means are we ready for competition yet. But we're in the process, and I think guys need to continue to embrace the process, all right, and grow every day and show our traits. I'm not going to bury the lead that everybody wants to talk about, which is the cornerbacks. I think we all know that defensive line is really deep and talented. Everybody's very excited about Harold Perkins. Omar Speights has not missed a beat coming in as a starter at inside linebacker. The question really has been the secondary, because of how much success LSU's receivers have had against those cornerbacks. So Matt House was talking a little bit about the roles there at cornerback. Guys are still competing for roles at this point. You know, you see good things out of them. What we're looking for is consistency. Day in and day out, exhibiting our traits and really being the guy that you can count on every snap. You know, we've had guys that have flashed. You know, Deuce strung a couple practices together earlier this week. You know, I got to get in and watch the film. Chestnut Stamps is growing up fast. Zai has done some good things. You know, we just got to continue to grow.
He mentioned two guys there that I want to elaborate on, which are Deuce Chestnut and Chestnut Stamps, because I think when I look at my notes from every practice, after every practice, the thing that is abundantly clear is 22, Deuce Chestnut, is their best cornerback. He's the guy they trust the most. Today, we got to watch them run 11-on-11 and 7-on-7. He had a really nice pass breakup today in the 11-on-11 period. And he's just been the guy that I'm sorry, it was in the 7-on-7 where he just blanketed Chris Hilton Jr. on a sluggo, and he's just been great. I don't know any way to say it. He's been their best guy. And then Chestnut Stamps is interesting because he's a true freshman who was the lowest rated signee in this class. And we fret so much about recruiting rankings. And he's the guy right now that is their third cornerback. Today, when they were running 11-on-11s, you had Deuce Chestnut and Zai Alexander. And when one came off the field to get a breather, they rotated a guy in, Chestnut Stamps was the next guy in. So those two guys for me have been fascinating. First, here was Matt House on Deuce Chestnut.
Deuce is a headsy player. What I have seen is he's got a unique skill set for baiting guys. That's the thing. You can tell Deuce has played football.
And again, not only he's been a 2-year starter at Syracuse where he was all conference. So, I remember it was the show we did at Pluckers, and I remember we were looking at the cornerback room and who might be the one poised to break out. A lot of people, of course, were talking about Denver Harris for good reason. I mean, he was a former 5-star, athletically gifted, all that sort of stuff. But Chestnut's the guy that's done it. You're looking for the guys that have done it the most at the level, and it's Chestnut and Zai Alexander. I don't think it's a surprise why those guys have sort of emerged. But here was Matt House on the freshman Chestnut Stamps.
You want to talk about as a staff, I mean, the guy came to camp 3 times to LSU to get a scholarship offer. I think that's all you need to tell about Chestnut Stamps. He wants to be here, he wants to be great, and he's not scared of competition. And sometimes that's not always true right now, right? And he's a dude that embraces competition every day.
It'll be really fun to watch the next couple of weeks. And they have some scrimmages coming up, and we'll be able to tell much more when they're going full on 11 on 11, how those rotations are going, who's standing out. The other two guys that I think everybody is going to ask about, that I get asked about all the time, is Harold Perkins and Maason Smith, and it makes the most sense, right? I mean, they were star players, both 5 stars coming out of high school. Maason had the freshman All-America, Harold Perkins had the freshman All-America season, and everyone's looking forward to a bounce back from Maason Smith coming off the injury. First, it's interesting with Harold Perkins mostly because he's moving positions. He's not playing the jack linebacker. He's moving inside and playing inside backer. So Matt House talked about how they're balancing that.
Right now, you're at the process where you're teaching them to play multiple positions, right? And then when you get into a specific game, you see what fits the scheme to stop that team and what he does well. Really, not just for Harold, but all our players. Where you're looking and trying to define roles, you're trying to find things that they can be successful at. What do they do well? What do they need work at? And what do you learn from them? And try to put them in those positions. And that's really what the summer's all about.
It's been maybe the most interesting thing about watching Harold Perkins is we haven't really seen him move. So move positions, I mean. So you hear Matt House saying we're teaching him different positions. What we get to see, Harold Perkins is right there in the middle of the defense. I mean, he's not lining up at that jack spot. Oddly enough, today at practice, when they were running dime packages, we actually saw Savion Smith go in. Again, no Maason Smith on the field. Savion Smith went inside, and Omar Spates moved out and was playing sort of in that nickel role in coverage. So and Chestnut moved back to safety. So it's been interesting how they moved in. I think you would all agree to a person. If you watched LSU a year ago defensively, Matt House put on a master's class in how to be versatile and creative with your personnel because of where you lacked. And look, they lacked on the interior defensive tackle, and so they had to get creative with how they moved people around and how they got both Perkins and Ojulari on the field at the same time. And they did a really brilliant job with it. I think they're figuring that out again, but it's really helpful when you have star players and elite talent like Harold Perkins with where to move them. Same goes for Maason Smith and sort of the impact of having Maason Smith back and what that's meant for this defense.
As we all know, Mason's got elite size and athleticism for a big man like that. He'd be the first to tell you he's knocking some rust off, right? This is really, if you look at it, the first 8 practices he's had where he's been able to go 11 on 11 for a year. But what you do see is that size and that athleticism. Now, he's just like anybody else. He's got improvement to be made. I think he would tell you right now, if he looked at you, he wants to improve his pad level. Like at times right now, he's playing high.
It's interesting to hear him say, Mason's playing high with a high pad level at times. But I think when you get into nuance, when you're that good of a player, that's whenever you really start to fine tune. And if you want a non-football but a related analogy, I would say look at Paul Skeens. I'm not trying to say he's going to be the first pick or anything like that, but Paul Skeens went from a guy throwing 95 to the greatest season any of us have ever seen because of nuance, right? Because when he got to LSU, he got in the pitching lab, and they tweaked his motion slightly to make him more efficient. And then, of course, he was taking care of his body more, and he went from 95 to 101, and had the greatest season ever. Because that was just playing in the margins. I think the same is true for Maason Smith. When you're that gifted and that talented, something as little as, hey, improve your pad level, which is it's a major thing. I mean, if you're standing right up, obviously the old saying, low man wins. But when you're Maason Smith, that type of physical ability compensates for a lot that you may miss in technique. But when you get the nuance right, that's when you can be really special. And I think Maason Smith could be really special this year. So it was interesting to listen to Matt House over the weekend talk about this defense here as they're less than 3 weeks away now from the opener against Florida State. And that defense has steady improved since camp started, where it was so overwhelmingly toward the offense. And now you're starting to strike that balance with who's having a good day on the offensive side or the defensive side of the ball. Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact. And be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.